everyone, and welcome to another Things We Said Today, our weekly crazy roundtable discussion of the Beatles, past, present, and to come. We're looking at our little crystal ball. I'm Steve Marinucci, contributor to Billboard and Access.com. And let me introduce my three cohorts in crime. First, from the Pennsylvania area, with the home of the Pittsburgh Pirates that are playing my Giants. I believe it's tonight, actually. Mr. Al, the executive editor of Beatle Fan, who just got back from the Fest for Beatle fans.
In Chicago.
In Chicago, Mr. Al Sussman. Hello, Al.
Hi, Steve. Hello there, everybody.
Is that the longest introduction you've ever had?
Something like that.
Okay. Okay. And secondly, let's see, how long can I drag this one out? Secondly, from Connecticut, the home of what's in Connecticut?
The Nutmeg
It's been so
State.
long since. The Nutmeg State. It's been so long since I've been there.
Home of the Carpenters.
Home of the Carpenters. Really? Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
David Seville.
Oh, there we go. The Connecticut. The Connecticut contribution to musical history. The
Big
host
Pens.
of what?
Big Pens.
Okay. The
Pens.
host of the Beatles show, Every Little Thing, Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone.
And out in Maine, the home of the lobster. I can't forget the lobster.
The
Yeah, I'm sorry.
lobster.
Well, as an original Bostonian, I'm sorry, I have to look at it that way. And also, deep in the heart of Red Sox country, I have to do that for you. I'm sorry. Our musicologist and Beatles author, Alan Cozen. Hello, Alan.
Go Yankees. Hey, Steve.
What are you going to do without Alex Bragg? What are you going to do without A-Rod, man?
Well, they come and they go, and new ones come and go, but the babe will always be there.
Well, there we go. There we go.
Doing his curse.
Okay.
Hi, Steve. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Alan. Okay. Now that we've got that down, this week we got a couple of things to talk about. There was a McCartney interview that made the news, and we're also going to have a little preview of something that will be out soon. But let's start with the Fest for Beatle Fans, where Mr. Sussman was for the past few days, and he just got back. He just off the plane.
Almost literally.
Almost literally off the plane, shaking, putting his. Have you unpacked yet?
Yes, I have, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Well, tell us how it was.
It was. It actually worked. It seemed to work very well. I think at least in terms of attendance, Friday I haven't heard an official figure, but Friday night and Saturday I think were a little better than expected, and Sunday was Sunday. I think at this time of year, especially with people having to take their kids back to school, back to colleges, and with some of the elementary schools and high schools and out in the heartland opening up either this week or next week. Sunday generally at the Chicago Fest is not a big day.
Right.
But there was a fairly good turnout. Now, a lot of what happened, full disclosure, a lot of what was going on in the main ballroom, I didn't get to see because I was busy, as anybody who was there knows. I was busy with doing assisting Tom Frangione with Name That Tune, and doing various panel discussions with Wally Podrazik and Susan Ryan, and doing Q&As and et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't really see a whole lot in the main ballroom. But as far as the guest roster, it was actually a pretty good one, especially for people who prefer the musical guests. Mm-hmm. Klaus Vormann was probably the main guest and the big guest, and and his appeal goes a couple of different ways. Not only the fact that he obviously drew the album cover for Revolver, and is a prolific artist in his own right. But he was also a musician who, especially in the 70s, was on an awful lot of an awful lot of solo Beatles records, right, Ken?
Absolutely, he did tremendous work on them.
Yeah, absolutely, he did.
He also made his own mark on several other albums too. I mean, he.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. But the one thing that always sticks in my mind is the live version of Bangladesh, and hearing his bass line. Oh man, it's great. It's great.
Absolutely.
But yeah. But
I was listening to that yesterday. As a matter of fact, I went to a record show and found the original, not the reissue, but the original issue of the Bangladesh CD with the replica booklet in it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So Klaus was there for virtually the entire weekend, signing copies of his new book, but he also did a Q&A in the main ballroom with Peter Asher, which I caught a little bit of, and from what I understand from other people, was very interesting. And he played a little bit as well. And Peter Asher was kind of almost the musical director of the weekend. He did some of the interviews. Of course, a lot of this was because of the fact that Terry Hemmert, the legendary radio personality from WXRT in Chicago, has recently. This has been a tough year for her. First, she had a cancer scare, and then just recently she had back surgery.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yep, right.
Get well, Terry.
And she was actually off the air for about a month, but she was bound and determined, if I can get the words out, to make it to the fest, and she did. She had to be helped upstairs and was getting around on a scooter, but still she gave it the old college try. But people like Tom Frangione and Peter Asher and others kind of helped to kind of pick up the slack. And in fact, on Sunday afternoon, one of the more popular features on Sunday in recent years has been a musicians forum. And Peter basically took the reins of that this time. In fact, he even stood at a podium and basically conducted the session almost as if he were a professor.
Wow.
The other and I should add, of course, that Peter performed live this time with Albert Lee, who is one of the great country rock guitarists. He doesn't have a big resume on his own as far as recordings, but he's done an awful lot of session work over the years. He was part of the lineup at the concert for George in 2002. He was the musical director for the Everly Brothers for the majority of the last maybe 20 years that they were together. And has, in fact, if you go onto YouTube, look up Albert Lee, Vince Gill. I think it's from the Crossroads Festival, about maybe 3 or 4 years back, and it is, if you're into guitar work, it is fabulous stuff. So Albert Lee performed with Peter Asher, doing again much the same kind of memories, time capsule type of thing that Peter has been doing over the course of the last several years.
It's like a storyteller show.
Exactly, bingo. And they did like two separate parts of it, one on Saturday and one on Sunday in the main ballroom. and they went down very well. And I guess the other major guest was Louise Harrison, who, well, she's Louise Harrison.
Okay.
She's George's sister, which counts, and but doesn't really have a whole lot that's all that significant to say. let's put it that way. Right. But people like her.
Yeah, I mean, she has that album that came out when back in the Beatlemania days, the album.
And she currently manages a Beatles. I think they're a Wigs and
right.
And called the Liverpool. Called the Liverpool Legends.
Were they with her?
No, they didn't play because after all, Liverpool is the pretty much the house band. Right. Although the kind of the offshoot of Liverpool, the Weaklings, who of course we know through our friend Glenn Burtnick, did play as well.
Okay.
And talked about recently their session at Studio 2 at Abbey Road.
Did you hear their new material? Any of their new stuff?
I didn't myself. As I said, I was upstairs for much of the time, especially in the afternoon. But I understand that they went down very, very well.
Yeah, Asher and Albert Lee have been playing together for some time. They've been doing lots of concerts.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, there's in fact, we were talking before we began taping that there's on YouTube, there's about a half-hour set that Peter and Albert did very early on in this tour. And it's amazing the amount of the musical depth that they both exhibit. But obviously Albert much more as a performer, as a guitarist. Mm-hmm. Whereas obviously Peter's great forte is as a producer. Mm-hmm. And you can and that's certainly that. It was interesting watching. I got to see a little bit of the sound check on Saturday morning. And Peter definitely has his his own way, Obviously, hey, the man's been producing records for how many decades now?
Right.
So
that's cool.
So it's
just looking at Albert's page. He will be touring Europe in late September and throughout October, and then he and Peter will get together in late October and go through November in the UK. Mm-hmm. So for those of you that are in Europe listening to us, you got that to look forward to.
Right.
It's always a great show to see Peter Asher with who he's with, because once he started performing again with Gordon, and those few reunion shows were just amazing. After Gordon passed away, he's looking for someone else to share the stage with. And so, he's worked with a lot of different people since then. Denny Lane, Chad and Jeremy at the last fest.
Right.
And they were amazing. Not only because it was Chad and Jeremy, but it was the two British duos at the same time. I'm sure a lot of fans probably were confused with the two. But it was nice to see. Yeah. It was nice to see Peter representing Peter and Gordon and Chad and Jeremy together. But whoever Peter chooses to team up with, it's a phenomenal show.
But the Peter, the Asher and Albert Lee thing seems to be sticking very well because they've been doing that for some time now, and so I have yet to see that duo, and I'm gonna have to catch them when they come out my way. But
well, or in the meantime, just look up that YouTube clip. And also in the musical vein, a few of the kind of the old faithfuls from many years at the fest were there as well. Billy J. Kramer was there with his he played on Saturday with his current band with Liberty DeVito. did a full set on Saturday with his current band, and then played with Liverpool on Sunday. Also, Joey Molland, the lone surviving member of the classic lineup of Badfinger, was there and did a great job. And of course, the eternal Mark Hudson, who is an acquired taste. Some people, a lot of the people that go to the fest love him, and then there are other people who scratch their heads.
Well, I'd only seen him the one time in LA, and I thought he wasn't. I thought he was pretty good, but he's appeared there a lot, and I don't know that's if that's part of the. I've heard the slow down that he does at the end of the shows. Is that the one that?
Oh, it's one. It's one of them. Also, he does about a 20-minute version of Working Class Hero.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That one I missed.
He does medleys. He does.
Yes, he does a lot medley,
of. And then he does a McCartney medley.
Right.
And he did in part of the medley. Actually, he did My Valentine, really raucous, like an up-tempo, raucous version of it. Kind of worked, I felt. But, Mark Hudson could be invaluable for all the knowledge that he has as a musician and as a songwriter. And when he first became involved with the Fest, he was amazing because he had all these stories to tell about working with Ringo in the studio on those albums. Yeah. He's kind of drifted away from that. I wish you would talk more and more about that because you'd get some insight of what Ringo's like in the studio and as an artist. But, it's become more his love of the Beatles, and I do love those. What did you call them, Al? Those sessions, the musicians sessions.
Oh, the musicians forums.
Yeah, because they all talk about the artistic and songwriting process and how it comes about, and you get it from the perspectives of so many different people in different walks of life. Whether it's Mark Hudson with Lawrence Juber and Glenn Burtnick, and all these great musicians who are also great songwriters too, and great musicians. Bringing their own story to tell, especially if they've worked with any of the Beatles too. So, I love that kind of thing. So he really can be invaluable if he's used correctly.
Sure. Sure. And I don't know. I think maybe, especially since it's been a pretty considerable amount of time, about a decade since he and Ringo parted ways. So I don't know. Maybe he feels that he doesn't really want to, keep basically, depending on his years with Ringo as his entree to being at the Fest. I think maybe he feels that he's that as a fan and all, he can relate to the kind of the average fan there, and maybe he feels that that's the way that he prefers to do it. Whatever.
Okay.
But he certainly is popular. And there's also, of course, all of the other parts of the Fest, both old and new. Things like the Fabratory. And also there was a fascinating room there where Tony Kaye had you probably have seen maybe those virtual reality clips of Paul McCartney. There were 5 clips all told, and they had a room there where you could basically put on a set, a headset, and a set of, I guess, goggles. I forget I'm not sure what you would call them, or a viewer, and you can watch basically a surround sound and visual, virtual reality look at those 5 videos, and it was pretty fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so things like that, and of course the usual standbys, things like the flea market and the video room and the audio visual presentations and the stuff that I'm involved with, upstairs, in what we call Wally's room, Wally Pedrazik. Who has been, obviously involved with the Chicago Fest. This is the 40th Chicago Fest for Beatles fans / Beatle Fest, whatever you want to call it, and Wally has been involved with every one of them.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so even though he has other obligations elsewhere in the building, so I kind of pinch hit, and Susan Ryan pinch hits, and Tom pinch hits, and other people. It's still basically, we still call it Wally's room, and that's where the panel discussions and the Q&As and Name That Tune and trivia and all are. And actually we got some nice turnouts there.
What were some of the panel discussions you were on, Al?
Well, we had similar to what we did in New York in April in Rye. Bruce Spicer, Chuck Gunderson, and I did a kind of a retrospective on 1966, but with Wally Pedrazik, kind of taking it in different directions, talking about basically when Revolver, which really didn't, in fact, I think we talked about this last week, which in its time, when it was first released, was almost ignored because of the Christ controversy and the beginning of the tour and Manila and everything else. When Revolver became Revolver, this great revered album, because it certainly was not a great revered album when it first came out. So we talked about that. I did a Q&A with Robert Rodriguez on Revolver, as a matter of fact, and various and sundry other things as well. So it was definitely a very busy weekend.
Were any of the authors' panels particularly revelatory?
No. Probably the main one was Piers Hemmingson, who has done a book about the Beatles' Canadian recordings or their Canadian albums. Mm-hmm. We did a Q&A with him, and he had some very interesting things to say about the kind of the development of, I guess, what you might call Canada's role in the beginnings of Beatlemania in North America. Because if you remember, the album, what was in fact the second Beatles album with the Beatles, called Beatlemania with the Beatles, was released in Canada in December of '63, and in fact there were singles of All My Lovin' and Roll Over Beethoven, right, that in fact made their way onto the American charts in the early weeks of '64, and it's probably not an accident that the first song the Beatles performed in the U.S. on the February 9th, 1964 Ed Sullivan Show was All My Lovin', and the first song they performed in concert 3 nights later at the Washington Coliseum was Roll Over Beethoven.
Mm-hmm.
You
really think it's because of the Canadian?
I mean, it's possible. It's possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But they certainly, and as a matter of fact, there was already a Beatles fan club in Canada, and when I Want to Hold Your Hand took off in January of '64, the NEMS organization hadn't yet formed an American Beatles fan club As a matter of fact, Scott Muni had begun a Beatles fan club on WABC in New York, but to kind of facilitate the beginning of an official fan club, the two girls who ran the Canadian Beatles fan club came down to New York the weekend that the Beatles arrived in America to kind of establish the fan club. So his Q&A was really interesting. Probably the other, and then for comic relief, there was Greg Sterlace, who
how did that go over?
Well, interesting, because not only has he released that book that came out early in the year on his look at Beatles books, but now he's come out with a critical, if you want to call it a critical guide, a very tongue-in-cheek critical guide to the Beatles and the solo recordings, and has given them all grades. But very tongue-in-cheek, because in fact some of the entries are one sentence. So
wow.
Yeah, so as I said, it was interesting for some comic relief.
Okay, interesting. So basically, the fest was good. And the one thing I was wondering, given the fact that a couple of years ago, if you guys remember, that they were going to do something with Klaus in L.A. and Klaus turned up really ill, and Ringo came in and kind of they did that thing with Ringo and Chris Carter. Apparently, from what you're saying, he's in really good health. And
well, I wouldn't say really good health. I mean, he he's not a young man anymore. He's in his I believe he's in his 80s now.
Yeah, I think
and he has had some health problems, and and he was kind of limited in he didn't spend all that much time signing, and didn't spend all that much time on stage, and he didn't perform either night in the fest concert, the traditional Saturday and Sunday night concerts. He didn't perform in either of those, but just the mere fact that he was there for the 50th anniversary, I think was definitely a positive. Of course, he did have a book to sell as well.
Right.
So
how many people brought Revolver albums for him to sign?
A lot. Because in fact the autographed copies of the book had originally sold out about a week before the fest began, and it was only within the last couple of days before the fest that they got some more copies. So I think a lot of people, figuring that they weren't going to get a book, brought their copies of Revolver.
Okay.
Did you see any panel discussions with Jude Kessler or Kit O'Toole?
Oh, yeah, Kit, absolutely. Jude actually didn't do any panels. She did two audiovisual presentations, one in the audiovisual room and one in the main ballroom, as kind of an early bird special on Saturday. But Kit was all over the place. She did as she did in New York. She and Scott Erickson did a live version of her Deep Beatles column. Deep Beatles Live. She and Wally did a conversation about the article that I've been hyping from the current issue of Beatle Fan about the advertising campaign for peace that John and Yoko began in 1969. Also, she and Robert Rodriguez did a panel on cover versions, the Beatles doing rock and roll and R&B and all. They each picked out about a dozen songs and played excerpts and talked about them and all. And plus also Kit was involved with both of the two women's panels. that Susan Ryan does on Saturday and Sunday. The one on Saturday was about the multi-generational appeal of the Beatles, and the one yesterday was a tribute to Sir George Martin.
Okay.
So yes, Kit was all over the place.
How about did you see Bruce Spicer at all?
Oh, Bruce. Sure. Well, Bruce was with Chuck Gunderson and me and Wally in the panel that we did. You may have the panel that we did on Friday night on 1966, and also he did his Butcher cover expose, if you want to call it that, in the main ballroom on Sunday afternoon, and later on Sunday afternoon he did his the Beatles albums on Capitol Records program in the audiovisual room. Cool. So Bruce was very, very much in evidence.
Very much in evidence. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any guys got any questions about the fest? Should we move on to other stuff?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good to me.
Another thing that got a lot of attention this week, actually two of them, are the Paul McCartney interviews in Rolling Stone and the New York Times. The New York Times one was, and I have to be honest, I did not see that one, but it was much smaller. But the Rolling Stone one was very lengthy, and he went through a lot of subjects. So a couple of things were not all that surprising. And of course, he was asked the usual question about Let It Be, and he really didn't answer that question. I was kind of disappointed about that. But he did talk about performing, which is really the meat of the interview. And that's what I thought was the best part, where he talks about the band and why he likes the band and why he likes performing with them and why he likes performing, at his age, and whether he'll keep going, which that was kind of cool. But Alan, let me start with you. What did you think of this the interview?
I thought it was pretty interesting, actually. I mean, it was with David Frick, who I think goes a way back with him, And, I think he actually did say something about Let It Be that we didn't know, which was that he isn't the one holding it back. And in fact, he didn't seem that concerned about whether it was out or not. And he kind of gave the impression that it was like, I thought that was out, but then said, it's not, there's talk about it being held back for this reason or that, but it's not me. I'm not the one doing it. He didn't imply necessarily who was, but
we all know who it is.
The girls are Beatles. I thought that was the takeaway line.
Yeah, that was interesting too. Also, the business of there still being stuff in the can, perhaps, that they could put out. He didn't seem awfully enthusiastic about that, but I mean, he also kind of said, in terms of the Beatles stuff, I give it a listen and I say okay, but I'm not really that involved in those projects. So that was kind of interesting. Well, like what you said about the band, I thought it was sort of interesting that he talks about being a dictator.
Yeah.
He's really overt.
Which is not that
not a big surprise, fact, right?
When we've talked to the band, when we talked to Rusty, I mean, you kind of get that impression that, the man is in charge. I mean, they're able to contribute, as Paul said, they're able to make suggestions, but it's really Paul's call.
Oh yeah, it's his band. It's his band. It's not you don't see Rusty or Brian doing songs.
Yeah. But that said, he did mention that, in putting together the set lists during the rehearsals for the tours,
yes,
the band sometimes comes up with things that he, as he basically put it, was sort of, too lazy to consider, and they've talked him into it. I think he mentioned Day Tripper has a hard bass part he didn't really want to bother, but they said, look, this would be great, so
right.
So that's kind of
benefit of Mr. Kite. Also.
Benefit of Mr. Kite was the one that caught my attention, because that was a big surprise when they added it, and I think it's worked very well, actually. I think that's been one of the better additions that he's made.
I would have thought that was Paul's idea, but evidently it was the band.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is interesting that he admits being a dictator. I've never heard him ever confess to that.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't for some reason think that was such a surprise. There have been little clips before where we've seen he is in charge, and he's basically, I mean, he's never, despite the self-effacing and very genial type of image he presents, it's been pretty clear that when he needs to take charge, he does. That's
not what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. It's not a shock.
Yeah.
That he is that way. It's just the shock that he's admitting it.
Yeah.
And saying it publicly. He compares the Beatles into Wings, which he said was less challenging. And now he's got this band, which he's had now for 15 years. And he does bring up the fact that they've been together longer than the Beatles. And it's even a different experience than Wings.
Yeah.
Saying that, he really is in charge here. But he does take suggestions from the other members of the group.
Yeah.
Well, it's given to who's in the band now versus who was in the band before. It's not. I don't see it as being.
It's the same band. It's been the same.
No.
I'm
talking about through the years. I mean, when you basically have a bunch of young guys now. Not I shouldn't say young because they're not really that young anymore. But I mean, when he, as opposed to Denny Lane and all those and Wings and those guys, I mean, he's been his game. I mean, I really don't find that all that surprising. Now, I'm not saying it's bad at all. I think it's the way it should be. But I'm not surprised that he's made it very clear that he's in charge. So,
Al, how about you? What did you think of the Rolling Stone interview?
I thought it was interesting. As I said, for me, that the takeaway line was
the Beatles girls.
Was the girls are Beatles, which and obviously a reference to Olivia and Yoko, right. and I have a feeling that that was in that just that one little line was kind of revealing, because I've always kind of felt that obviously we know that anything that comes out of Apple has to have 100% approval of the 4 directors. And that includes something like Let It Be. And I've always had the feeling that if there was a negative vote or negative votes, they probably were coming from either from Yoko or Olivia or both. So I have a feeling that comment, that little comment there, is kind of revealing.
But the funny thing is that a lot of people have always thought it would be Paul holding it back, because as he points out in this interview, he doesn't come off that well. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think they should put it out, and they should also have an alternate edit, because we've all heard the tapes, and there's other stuff that went on, and I think you could see the whole thing in a completely different light, given what's available. I mean, there is an alternate universe, Let It Be, that could be a happier film.
Yeah, that's what Ron Fleming told me in an interview. Did you think that Beatle Girls comment was an insult? Because I've seen people. No. I think it was just. I think it was just I thought kind of a sly little comment, just to kind of say that that they that the two of them have basically they have as equal a vote as Paul and Ringo, and that and again I think it probably was slipped in there kind of as a device to show that that probably the negative what's keeping Let It Be from official release on DVD is probably the girls.
Without citing which one.
Right. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but it could be both of them. Obviously they would both have reasons for not wanting it out, because
Why would Yoko be against it?
Yoko would be against it because John always used to say. I mean, it's interesting how touchy everybody is about this film. John used to say at the time the film was made, he said, "Yeah, this film just shows how it's basically Paul being in charge, and we're just sort of there." And so if Yoko sort of internalized that attitude about Let It Be, she could be against it coming out. I don't know.
And probably the same thing with Olivia regarding George.
Yeah.
See, I think you could go around and there's still not really get an answer. I mean, there's an obvious person that you point at and say you think it's them, but given what he says, I'm not so sure. The only one, obviously, that is out of the loop as far as objecting, I would think, would be Ringo.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see. Yeah, because I don't see. He doesn't really come off badly in the film at all. So, so I don't think he would have any objection.
Not to mention, we get a glimpse of Octopus's garden.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, there's that one segment with Yoko jamming with the band that, assuming that they would. They've restored that. That would be a great outtake to throw out. I mean, I think to put out there. I think that's one of the best clips of that. Of that whole session. Of them jamming. I mean, it's so unlike. It goes against everything you've ever heard, and there they are all jamming together. So, I don't know. It's hard to say, and I just hope. I hope somebody has made a decision and we'll get it eventually. It's crazy.
Except George. George isn't in the jam because the jam took place right after that was what was done the rest of the day when George quit.
Yes.
So.
Right.
Well, part of the fascination with the Beatles is the mystery behind them, because we're never probably going to get the answers as to why Let It Be still hasn't come out.
Right.
And I've also heard rumors that George just felt that the movie was way too depressing, and that's why he didn't want it out. So regardless of what we think, because when we did a show on Let It Be, I watched it for the first time in quite a while, and I didn't think it was that depressing at all.
No.
I really didn't. It wasn't as bad as, people have said that it is. But, that's just what I heard about George. So Olivia probably just honoring George's wishes. If it is George.
And like I said, Ron Furmanek said the restored version, which I guess that bootleg version that came out last year is as close as you're going to get to that. It's pretty uplifting. I wouldn't say the bootleg version is uplifting, but it certainly looks better than a lot of what we've had. So
it looks better, but it's fundamentally the same film. It's not like alternate edits or anything really.
Yeah. Also, since Ken was asking about the interview, actually both interviews, both the Rolling Stone interview and the shorter one in the Times, Paul really talks about how just we keep talking about you should shorten the shows, and there's some credence to that, but you can tell how much he enjoys being a performer.
Yeah. The Times interview was basically number 873.
Yes.
What do I want to see him play? That story,
He also addresses, I'm not sure if it's the Times or Rolling Stone, about doing either all new material or maybe all solo material.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling, reading these interviews, if he's listening to our show, because we're addressing the same things here. It's almost like so many of these topics are the same things that we bring up here all the time. Sure. And he's saying, to do a show of new songs or probably all solo is not as he probably would invite that more. It's probably that no one has suggested it to him. It's almost like he says he doesn't go around planning his life. So a lot of what he does, are decisions that he makes in the moment. So I don't know if you believe that, but that's the way he comes across here.
So
but it's almost like...
If you're listening, Paul, have your guy call our guy. We want to have a word with you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. At this stage, he obviously does kind of battle his own inclinations as far as what he thinks he should be doing live. Whether it's keeping the set heavily Beatles, or whether he should do more of the solo material, or even say the 70s material, let's put it that way, or whether he should be doing more of his more recent things. And and again, he does talk about this, that black hole that seems to appear when he does do the more recent things, and then when he does the Beatles songs or the Wings hits, out come the cell phones.
Right.
And that also depends upon where you see him.
Yeah.
Because when I was talking about the last two shows that I saw at Fenway, they were very respectful of his solo stuff. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel that in New Jersey. I felt that was mainly, everyone wanted to hear Beatles there. But they were pretty much staying in their seats at Fenway. So, and in fact, as I had even pointed out, when he did 4 or 5 seconds, the crowd was singing along with it at Fenway. So it's a different crowd everywhere you go.
When I saw the show in Fresno when the tour to open the tour, that was a college crowd basically, because it was a college, and they were going crazy on both. They love both the solo and the Beatles songs,
right?
Which is interesting. So, and 4 or 5 seconds, as I recall, got a big reaction, very big reaction, which was not surprising. I mean, that's the kind of group that would know that song very well. So
sure,
I should also say that when I was talking about when Paul was thinking about doing shows that were just solo or more solo, he was also inviting the idea of playing smaller venues, which he said is not as challenging as you think. And for someone who seemed to like back in the early 90s, when he was doing those few shows in England in small clubs to get ready for Unplugged, I think he really enjoyed that. So I'd love to see him do something like that now. That would be amazing.
Don't forget he did a bunch in 2007 as well of little places. Saw him at the High Line in New York.
Yes.
So, and that was around the same time he did Amoeba in L.A.
Yeah.
So there were a bunch of little shows that kind of featured the stuff from memory almost full, but not to the exclusion of what will be his normal set, just that it was much shorter.
Right, and then to get on the other side of that, he'll be doing Desert Trip in October with big festival with Dylan and the Stones and Neil Young and the Who. So oh well.
Right.
The question I was going to throw out at you guys is, with the tour ending, because it is coming to an end, where do you think he goes from here? As far as touring,
he talked about making a new album.
Yeah, right.
Do you think there will be another tour?
Oh, I'm sure. Of
course. As long as he's healthy.
Yeah. Okay. No question about it. He you can tell from the comments that he makes in both of those interviews that he still really enjoys the performance aspect.
Mm-hmm. And you can see even if you pick an individual clip on YouTube, you can see that is definitely the case, that he definitely does. Oh yeah. I mean, some performers you can see them on stage and they're basically just they're putting on an act. You can see
going through the motions.
Right. Just not, and I would be the first to say if he was, and it sure as hell doesn't seem like he is. I mean, he looks like he's having even if he does the same routines about the, let me soak it in and all this stuff. And
he even, I forget which interview he addresses that in. I think it may be the Times interview. He addresses that, and he says that, and he says exactly what I had mentioned here, that. When you go to see a Broadway show, they're saying lines, and they say the same lines every night. So he does kind of maybe a slight variation on those lines every night, but it's basically it's just simply part of the show.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's been that way forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even in the Beatle days, how many times did he say, clap your hands and stamp
right.
and do the little pillow hands.
I'm getting a little ahead because we were going to talk about Hollywood Bowl actually in a couple of minutes, but I absolutely love the fact on the bootlegs where in the Hollywood Bowl show where he goes, well, I'm sorry, we can't do any more because we've never done any more than this, and they've left that off. They've left that off the album, unfortunately. Yeah. I that moment is great, and I kind of wish. And in fact, on the album when they released it in '77, there was a sharp edit. Anybody who heard that part knew it was there, and it's not there, and it's still not going to be there. But yeah, I mean that kind of thing. He always makes those comments. Some of his comments are great. You have to give him that. But he's got this great stage presence. I had between him and comparing him and Ringo, his stage patter I think is a lot better, much better. But
yeah, I asked him about that once, after the '89 when nobody had seen him for a while, and he came back and did the '89-90 tour, and and I had said, if you listen to the bootlegs, that all the patter is the same pretty much at every show, and I was just sort of wondering why there's not any spontaneity about that. And the example I brought up was Gertrude Higgins, and introducing Gertrude Higgins, and so that's the one he specifically addressed. And it was interesting because thought had gone behind it. It sounded to us just like a sort of glib joke, but what he said is, the Gertrude Higgins thing, I'm introducing the band and I'm introducing Linda. And there is always going to be some wag out there who's going to shout something if I introduce Linda. But if I say Gertrude Higgins, everyone's laughing, and that doesn't happen. I thought that was really kind of interesting, that these things are thought through.
And if you remember in the Get Back film, there was even that little sequence there where they had like a collage of him introducing Gertrude Higgins, in various ways.
Yeah.
So that kind of confirms that.
Yeah.
These interviews, though, I just want to say, I just find them interesting only because I think Paul's being a lot more candid. It's like he's comfortable in his own skin. He's saying whatever he feels like. So I really get that impression. He's not being so careful about everything that he says. So, and also this whole idea about unreleased Beatles material, that it just seems like they're not the ones initiating a lot of this stuff. Maybe someone comes to them and says, how do you feel about a live project? Because it certainly comes across like, if you have an idea, present it to me. But they're not the ones. Paul and Ringo are not the ones who are going to start something.
Right.
True. Very true.
Yeah.
So...
Yep.
They certainly weren't the ones who started the love.
Well, George was the one who started
that. Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
Okay. Let's
Speaking
let's
of
move
live
on.
projects.
Speaking of live projects, Alan and I both have been listening to the Hollywood Bowl album for about a week now.
Yes, the two professional journalists get their copies.
And I thought we would just give a brief preview of what you guys are going to hear. I will say that I've done some not comparisons with all of the versions, but some of the recent bootleg versions, and the sound is definitely cleaner to me. Certainly doesn't sound as distorted. There's no. It's definitely cleaner. They've definitely done some work on these, and sounds. Alan, we were talking before we went on the air. You noted there's some reverb.
Yeah, I think there's more reverb around the vocals. I mean, one of the differences between the bootlegs and this is the bootlegs are made from sort of mono mix, and the new version and the 1977 version really were made from 3 tracks, but Giles Martin says that they have 3 tracks sort of a generation or so better than what his father had in 1977. He recreated basically all of his father's edits, and he recreated for the first, part of the disc the exact running order that his father had.
Right. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything different. Did you?
No.
Yeah.
But I think he just put a little bit more reverb around the vocals, and I think we both noticed, or at least had the gut impression that the screaming was a little bit lower on the new version. And I have to say, we've already talked about the album a couple of weeks ago about the running order, and I think we both agree that hearing it hasn't made us feel necessarily better about the running order.
Right.
But,
I liked it, as I think I said when we talked about this. I'm glad that they redid the 77 album, but I'm also thinking that there will be more to come.
Hope so. My feeling listening to the disc the first time through, like when it was over, and you don't necessarily know. When it's over because you've got the track list and everything. But you think of a Beatles show being over, one of these shows being over with either Long Tall Sally or I'm Down, and so it's not over with that. It's over with Babies in Black, I think.
Right.
But I remember it ending and feeling really disappointed that it was over. And, it's been a long time since I've probably heard an album where I felt really disappointed that it was over, and that's even knowing the stuff. So the sound of it was just so... I thought it was really good and really uplifting, and I really enjoyed listening to it, even though I'm kind of critical of how they chose to do it. As an experience, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think if they had put one of the actual closer songs, if they put I'm Down or Long, at the end, for example, I think it would have been a lot better. But to end on Babies in Black, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But
let me ask you this: since obviously now you've heard how the album sounds. Do you now understand why they made this decision rather than going with a soundtrack which would have, 2 tracks from Washington Coliseum and 1 track from the Swedish Drop-In show and 1 track from the Paris show in the spring of '65 and a couple of tracks from Shea Stadium, which would have been so inconsistent.
Yeah,
as an audio document.
But who says they won't when they put out the DVD and Blu-ray?
That's true. That's true.
I think they had to do that basically because I think the outcry they saw the outcry over the years. People were screaming and yelling for Hollywood Bowl. It would have been nice to have the full shows. I listened to the '65 show with the mic problems, and unless they could fix that, I would think that they probably wouldn't put that up. But even if they could have, people probably wouldn't have complained that much.
Yeah,
because it's an artifact. It's history.
And they have 2 '65.
Well, that's
shows,
how we see it.
Right. They do have 2 '65 shows, but that specific one that one in particular where they had the mic problems, it actually sounds kind of like you cut a channel out of the stereo almost to listen to it. But otherwise, it's great. It's great. So I'm very much looking forward to it, to getting or to having everybody hear it and get their reaction. And I think everybody will be relatively pleased, I think.
Does it feel like it has a lot more punch, these recordings?
I kind of thought so.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Maybe the reverb creates that impression to a degree, There may be some people who feel it's too much reverb too, but I kind of thought the whole thing sounded really powerful.
Yeah, I've been listening to it on headphones mostly. I haven't listened to it open air yet. I'm going to have to do that. Yeah, it did sound pretty powerful. I mean, and your comment, Alan, about it sounding, sounding so positive and making, being so joyful to listen to is just, I mean, just hearing all those screams. Oh God. But anyway, all right. I think we have we've come to the unfortunate end again of our little weekly gathering. You can get a hold of us by writing Things We Said Today radio show at gmail.com and tell us how much you love us, how much you want to send us money. No, I'm kidding. How much you, what you think of our shows. We would love to hear from you. We get comments all the time, and we try to keep up and write back to you, and who knows, you may get a personal response from one of the four of us. You can get a hold of me by on Facebook. I have my own Facebook page. I also have a Beatles news group called Beatles News and Commentary that I swear to God, has been growing by leaps and bounds the past couple weeks. So join me there, and we'll talk about Beatles news and whatever you want to talk about. Al, where can people get in touch with you?
On Facebook, I'm at Al Sussman. On Twitter, it's at ASUSS49, or through Beatle Fan Magazine, www.beatlefan.com, or www.paradingpress.com for Changing Times, 101 Days That Shaped the Generation, which I got some very nice comments about over the weekend at the Chicago Fest for Beatles fans.
Because I mentioned you, that's why.
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay.
It's all because of Steve.
It's all because. Ken, how can people get
Steve and Greg Sterlace, who slipped a review of the book into this album guide.
Did he really?
Yeah, for reasons best known to Greg. I don't know.
Okay.
Strange young man.
Ken, how can people get a hold of you?
My email address is everylittlething@att.net. There's also my website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com. I got a couple of things to mention about the website because I always have Beatles trivia every single week that gets posted on Mondays, and you have a full week to answer. Well, the current one is for 2 full weeks, and you can win 2 prizes out of 9 to pick from on the website. And if you happen to live in the New York metro area and you hear this show by August the 19th, I do have a pair of tickets to give away to see the Claypool-Lennon Delirium playing in New Haven, Connecticut at College Street Music Hall, and that's on August the 27th, and I should be going to that show. So it's very easy to win. You go to the concerts and events page on my website. So if you live in that area, it's also a very handy page because it tells you all the Beatles tribute bands, anybody in the Beatle world performing in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New England. That's all on my website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com.
Okay, Ken, thank you. Mr. Cozen, how can people get a hold of you?
I guess on Facebook at either Alan Cozen or Alan Cozen Remixed. Sean Lennon and the Lennon Claypool Delirium will be in Portland, Maine on, I think, the 28th or 29th, probably the 29th. And I'll probably go to that too, so if you can catch me hanging around, at the bar or whatever.
Okay.
So we should do a review.
Well, yeah.
Together on the show.
Yeah. So, so that's basically that.
Okay, and you can write to me directly. I don't think I gave him BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. I also actually have a new email address that I'm not sure if where I'm going to go with it. It's by SteveMarinucci@gmail.com, so you can write to me at either address. And that's about it, folks. We have run out of time. So for Ken Michaels, Alan Cozen, and Al Sussman, this is Steve Marinucci for Things We Said Today, and we will see you next time.